My name is Andreassen, and together with Roger Adan, we will have this little session on international challenges in international cooperations. And we will start by giving a few introductory slides, and then we'll have a little discussion. And I need to step out a bit early, so because of some rescheduled flights. But what are, I think the challenges of international cooperations are, of course, important, but I think we will start by giving some of the advantages of doing international collaboration. And so I work in Oslo at the University Hospital there, and I've been involved in several of these international collaborations. And one, since I'm here, we had this prevention of severe mental disorders cluster through the ECMP. And this is a lot focusing on precision medicine. You know, how can we develop more targeted treatments? And this is exactly what we need to do in our field, also brain diseases. But this paper here in how healthcare is going to change mentioned a lot of the elements that we are dealing with here with genetics, big data, electronic health records, phenomics, but also the international big longitudinal cohorts. And you don't get that if you don't have large collaborations. And so I think they forgot to mention the brain in this paper. They have everything about cancer and diabetes, but it's not one word about mental or neurological diseases. And of course, this is the whole precision medicine is based on mechanistic understanding, but then that's Roger's job. You will talk a bit more about the basic science and how to translate. So the ECMP, the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology, is really a big organization in this field. So we've been involved there in a network that are disease-oriented, but then also this other one of prevention of severe mental illness. So this is a big organization, and the whole focus there is to have networks across Europe, because that adds value to the research and also important for clinical aspects. And here are some, you know, it's really Spain and Czech, and I don't see, by the way, Hungary here on the list. But this, I guess this is something we can, so everybody who wants to join this, just send me an email. Then another big network that's been very successful is this Psychiatric Genomics Consortium. Anybody heard about that? It's a big international way of collecting large data from patients and controls. There are 150 institutions across the world, and I think it's published now 750 papers soon. And it's really a way to work together, because people in the field have seen it's not working if you don't collaborate, because you have many small effects, and you will not discover a small effects gene variant if you don't have large samples. But it's very promising. So this is the most recent paper for what we are involved in, and this is the GWAS signal in bipolar disorder is now under revision, is ready for being published, and there's now nearly 300 loci. But to obtain that number, you need like 150,000 cases and over 2.5 million controls. But then you get reliable signal because of the small effects. And then another one is Enigma. Anybody knows about that? It's an international study applying imaging. You know, you can now do a brain scan at your local hospital, a clinical level quality, and then you can bring these data together in large consortia. So this is the imaging genetics of meta-analysis. The whole point is that you have these brain scans across the world, and then exactly as in genetics imaging, there are small, subtle effects of the brain. It's not like in schizophrenia, the hippocampus is gone or we have a damage. But for mental illnesses, this is quite the way you need to do it. And there's really interesting to work on this because there's so many, people around the world, and you combine it and you find similar biology all across the world. And I think that's also quite important. Then finally, I just want to say something we're working on the home base. So in the Nordic region, we have a lot of registries and healthcare data. So we're focusing now on these big registries. We now have nearly 1.9 million people genotyped. You can follow them over time and look for like real world evidence of treatment effect or side effects. So this is something we are focusing on. And then at our country, in Norway, it's a big country, not many people there, but we are now working together with the population cohorts. It's like 400,000 people now from north here, Tromsø, it's up here. This is a region to mid-west, and then the mother and child is from all over the country, and there you follow people from the beginning. And nothing like this can happen if you're like a single scientist working. This is 115,000 kids. Even if you worked for the rest of your lives, you would never ever manage to do that. So this is why you need these collaborative studies and focus more on the future. So this is really my take on this is highly fruitful. We can discuss the challenges afterwards about the sitting in all the committees and all the. I had to step out here for the meeting because they had a meeting in one of these consortia. So you get this consortia fatigue, but it's very fruitful and has been for many kind of clinically translational aspects in mental diseases. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Ole. So maybe there's questions specifically to Ole because he has to leave earlier. But if there are no questions, then I give an introduction and we have a general discussion. So if I can have my first slide. I'm here because I was the chair of the BRAINFOOD cluster. And the BRAINFOOD cluster was an initiative of the ECMP nutrition network. So as Ole introduced, the ECMP is an organization that helps scientists with networking by investing in getting together. And the European Brain Council secured funding for the EBRA cluster project, and BRAINFOOD was one of them. We had two activities. First of all, we organized workshops to bring together stakeholders, and then we organized a BRAINFOOD policy meeting forum with policy makers. And of course, the issues, we probably are familiar with the issues that the health and economic costs every year in Europe is around 800 billion euros. And then, of course, when it comes to nutrition and brain health, it's a bit surprising that the full potential of nutrition is not utilized. And the reason for this is that it's under-investigated and there was no funding prioritized. And the problem with food is food are not drugs. So for a pharmaceutical industry, they really have one compound which they can deliver in a case control study. That's way more difficult for the food industry, because for the food industry they teach us as a stakeholder, like, we never get a return of investment because it's very difficult to protect a food because that's something different than a drug. But then at the same time, 9 out of 10 citizens in Europe would change their diet if they knew it would lower the risk for cognitive decline. So there is really lack of evidence, and there's poor knowledge also with professionals. So how to move forward? We need to increase public awareness that nutrition matters, brain health needs to be prioritized, and policy is essential to obtain funding. So is there evidence that food plays a role in brain health? Well, there's of course a lot of vitamins, and I think vitamin B12 clearly, if you have a deficiency in that, you have an increased risk for all kinds of mental disorders. It's very clear that epileptic children benefit from a ketogenic diet, and there's also a lot of data out there that are informative that the Mediterranean diet is a healthy diet, although it's still unresolved mechanistically how that works. So what we did as a cluster, so as a network, we published white papers, let's say. So this was the first one that we published from coming out of the nutrition network. This is just one picture out of that initiative, and where we addressed the different problems. So if you look at, for instance, how the whole field of nutrition, which I think is still a very underdeveloped area of research, how it originated 100 years ago was because chemists teamed up with doctors, and then all the vitamins were discovered. And I think that the reason that vitamins were easy to identify is because they have a high affinity to the proteins they interact with. But there's many other micronutrients, many of which we don't know yet, that need to be discovered, because we really have a poor understanding what exactly the role of certain micronutrients is for brain health. And then, of course, there's a lot of blaming for macronutrients. You have to reduce carbs and fat, but it's misleading because some fats are really essential, right? And then the problem is also that there are individual differences in how people respond to diets. And then if you do research, dietary assessments are very difficult in humans. Most of you won't immediately recall what they ate in the afternoon 2 days ago, for instance. And then human intervention studies are also very difficult to do when it comes to food, because if you change someone's diet, you also, you not only have a new diet, but you also they are moving away from the old diet. And it's very difficult to keep people on a certain diet. And then the field is also polluted with claims that lack scientific evidence. You probably have heard some of these claims as well. What we really need, and this is not only for, I think, the relationship between nutrition and brain health, but more in general for brain health, is we need to unravel mechanisms underlying disease, and also mechanisms how nutrition impacts on brain health. I just took one of the hypotheses out there that, for instance, we have these enteroendocrine cells in our gut that sense the luminal place where the food is digested, and microbiota play a role there. There's a lot of receptors on the villi over here, and the activity of these receptors determine the profile of hormones that are released from the gut, such as, for instance, GLP-1 and somatostatin and so on. Then next, these hormones do not only act in a paracrine manner, but they also act on the brain. And in the brain, in the satiety center, in the hypothalamus, but also in the brainstem, in this is the hunger center, this is the satiety center. You find these receptors, but also in the higher brain centers, such as the ventral tegmental area, but also in the amygdala. You see that there are receptors for ghrelin, there are receptors for GLP-1. So it means that depending on what you eat, these enteroendocrine cells release certain hormones that impact on your brain, and they also determine, in fact, how you feel. And this is one mechanism how what we eat can influence, the development of psychiatric disorders. So another paper we published 2 years ago was in Brain Behavior and Immunity, where we had recommendations both at the level addressed to the science to increase scientific evidence, and also to produce effective messages concerning the role of food for brain health. So, and the kind of things we proposed was that we really need to identify nutrients that impact on brain health. We need to identify the neural circuits that these nutrients act on, and we need to bridge basic science mechanisms to clinical outcomes. So we really have to translate it to the clinic. But at the same time, we also need to be better in the messages we deliver to the public domain and to professionals. So we have to implement dietary recommendations better. We have to realize that personal nutrition, what is good for one individual, may not be good for another one. And we have to improve nutritional education, not only of citizens, but also of healthcare professionals. And then our last paper we published was was also a policy actions that we called for to be required, where you had the similar kind of points. We need to increase the causal and mechanistic evidence, which requires more funding. We need to improve the effective messaging, and also the funding is really important. So the point I want to make is that it's very important for better brain health that we unravel mechanisms. And for mechanisms, this is the other advocacy thing I do, is protecting animal experimentation, because animal experiments are essential to understand brain mechanisms. And there's a lot of political pressure nowadays to reduce animal experimentation. And just as an example, if you look in the Netherlands, there is 100 million chicken, 4 million cows, 60 million pigs, and only 500,000 experimental animals. So less than 0.5% of the animals are used for experimentation compared to the meat and the fish industry. And if you think about ethics, I think if you put on the y-axis the weight of the animal, and on the x-axis, on the y-axis, how much ethical concerns people have, of course, nobody is concerned with using flies and worms for their research. And a mouse becomes already a bit more difficult, but a monkey is even more difficult, and an elephant, forget about it for all kind of reasons. But there's kind of a unit. If you just take body weight as an ethical unit, let's say, well, in practice you could do that. Of course, we have to do better, but then it's really neglectable that experimental animals, how we use them. And still there's a lot of political pressure. And also there we need to be more clear to the public domain why we use animals, and we have to be transparent about why we do things and so on. For this, I was involved in organizing several symposia in congresses, for instance at the IBRO, but I did this also at the FENS meeting. At the FENS, I'm also part of the FENS Care Committee, which is an advocacy group for responsible use of animal experimentation, and also for the protection of animal experimentation. And also the European Brain Council has a task force directed to animal experimentation advocacy. So challenges in engaging in international collaborations, that was the task Ole and I got. I think for me, getting the right information on time is very important. Networks are really important. That really helped me in my connecting with other groups. And also it gave me access to advocacy groups. The challenge is also to balance my scientific work with the societal wishes. And this is related to the next point, to balance ambition, what you promise, with realism, what is feasible. It's very easy as a scientist to promise that you're going to do something, but if it's, if you can make a nice story, but still it needs to be realistic. So that's a challenge to balance these two things. And I think we have, as scientists, to fight misconceptions and beliefs that have no scientific rationale or evidence. Like, for instance, that some beliefs about food, for instance, that certain foods are very helpful and healthy for certain conditions, and otherwise that animal experimentation is going nowhere. This kind of misconceptions we need to fight as scientists as well. This was my last slide, but I think, of course, everybody has his own story when it comes to challenges in engaging international cooperation. So I'd like to open the floor for discussions. So who likes to add something to the discussion? Yes?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Diogo Pinto. I'm grant manager at a Portuguese company that develops virtual reality solutions for cognitive assessment and training.
For what assessments?
Cognitive assessment and training. As a grant manager, I've been working with European and national funding for a while. And I also have these questions on to better engage with international and national collaborations. And my point is here for the balance between ambition and realism. which I think it's probably one of the most critical aspects when you are building a consortium especially for European projects. And my point, maybe a controversial opinion, but I think the impact of what we are doing and the metrics and KPIs that we put there, probably they should be a bit more legally binding, let's say. And we should commit a bit more to what, or with the Commission, of course, and other funding programs, to commit a bit more with those KPIs. Because it's public funding, it's something that we're doing. Of course, it's still science, so it's difficult sometimes to balance between what was our effort and what was the outcome. But still, I think what we are promising in terms of impact should be a bit more important and not so, and more tangible in terms of the final evaluation and the final funding of the project. And eventually, one of the ways to do it also is for the Commission or for any of these programs or agencies to have some funding available for projects that, for instance, meet all the KPIs or went above the KPIs, and say, you don't need to go for another call. You have more money to continue your work,
so
which is the plan.
Are you meaning that at the end of the project, if it really succeeded, it gets a bonus? Is that what you're saying?
Or a bonus, or like there's a kind of a fast track for another project, you know? You don't need to have a new call or to wait for a new program.
I see what you mean, yeah.
You comply with, you met your KPIs. What you propose is quite, you need time and you need effort to do it. You don't need to wait for another program to apply for another grant. Maybe because there's some funding here.
That's a good idea, yeah.
There's some funding here just for projects that are outstanding. And what do you need? You need 4 million more to achieve 4 years of work?
But in fact, you're saying at the end of your project, you have met your deliverables, and sometimes some of them you delivered and some you didn't. But those projects that really delivered and even more than they promised should get access to additional funding more quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And especially in the healthcare sector, I think it's interesting because everything takes much more time than in other sectors. We know how health works, and we need to, and more funding is needed. So people are aware of that, and even private funding is aware of that. The government, all the policy makers are aware of that, and so eventually there could be a fast track for projects that meet it or are outstanding in terms of KPIs.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. What do others think? Would it be good? Yeah.
Some national bodies already have it. So
oh yeah.
The Medical Research Council has small amounts of funding to develop pilot programs or implementation.
Which are based upon an ongoing project.
It's called Confidence in Concepts. That's what the program is called. Okay. But there's small amounts of money. As far as I know, the European Union doesn't have any thing, and nobody has the chance to say, look, we've delivered a very successful project or program grant. Give us some priority to apply for big funding ahead of it, because especially with the new models of funding, the calls are very amorphous, and you're usually competing with 50 different diseases, and there's nothing focused, but there's evidence of success. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, but then of course the problem is who judges it. Huh?
The same people that judge it the first time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
This one is best. This one is the one getting the funding. So eventually a higher number of evaluators. It couldn't be, I don't know if the 3 evaluators that are in the commission evaluating your proposal eventually could be a bigger group. I don't know, but I think it's a good way of also make people a bit more aware of the importance of the results.
The importance of delivering and not hit the money and run. Huh?
Exactly, because we all know how European projects work, and we know how some of these KPIs can be, you can justify them with, we did the best we could, but we didn't achieve it.
Yeah.
Maybe we need another way to monitor this and to have some impact. For instance, I can tell by the Portuguese funding rules, if you don't meet at least 80% of the KPIs that you promised, you need to give money back to the government, which I think, if in certain cases,
But that's a punishment.
It's kind of a punishment.
Yeah.
Well, of course it needs to be, if you can justify and you well, first it's a clinical trial. You don't get enough centers, or you could not recruit patients. There was something with the recruitment or something. They understand and it's okay for them. But you need to clearly justify. Of course, it's always a balance, you know. But but you might need to give money back to the government.
Okay. Other challenges people face.
Can I ask how many people you have had success in collaborating with North American funding bodies? Yeah, so the US, it'll mostly be NIH.
Not me.
Have,
Nobody
have,
else.
have people tried?
I once tried.
Oh.
A BBRF.
Okay.
Yeah. Why are you asking?
So the people who are doing coordination of the activity, the preliminary activity, were asking about INTBEAR. And we were successful, but the way we did it was to have two parallel streams of funding with similar calls, because the NIH is not keen on joint calls. And the reservation that the European Union has for making it open to US participants is that they may be flooded by it, and that's not fair to all the European states. So I was just wondering whether anyone else had a model of success.
Yeah.
We did participate in small NIH small business grant.
That's for an NIH grant.
NIH
No
grant.
collaboration with
No.
the European.
No. And yeah, and we could be like subcontracted, not as a partner.
Yeah. And to what extent do other people in the audience have difficulty with balancing ambition with realism? It's of course nowadays with any grant you have to promise quite a bit, otherwise you don't get the money. How do you deal with that?
90% of what you promise has to be done already.
Yeah, that's the way you do it. So you already did it, and then you promise it, and then you're always successful. Yeah. Yeah. Other points?
I think you need people on the team who hold back those of us who are too enthusiastic in a way, not to promise too much. So
Yeah, hopefully the reviewers are critical enough that they say this is not realistic.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's the yeah, that's what you need, is to think with the head of the reviewers, and if you're writing a grant, if you're already writing the grant with the team, a good balance of people who are visionary people and realistic researchers will help with setting realistic promises.
Yeah.
That's a problem, that's a problem when the grant is supporting a large collaboration, because you have to know whether your collaborator in the other institution is a visionary or a realist, and that's not always very clear. If it's a single group, then you know what you can deliver and you balance it out. And what I've run into problems with is I've made promises because of enthusiastic, well, over-enthusiastic interpretations of what is possible. We always deliver, but based on, I don't know who was saying, you can construe it as having delivered rather than having delivered.
Yeah, it's also the phrasing of the deliverables
yeah.
that are always very realistic. Huh?
Yeah.
And that is, if you make it very easy for yourself, you of course always succeed. But then the advance, the progress is limited. Yeah.
But actually But actually, the Commission is implementing something like this with the lump sum scheme, where you need to either you accomplish what you promised and then you deliver, and then they give you the money, or if you don't, they don't give you the money.
But that is still delivery of process. It's not output.
Yeah,
We just do the work.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fair. I don't know what the result is going to be.
Yeah, it needs to be fine-tuned.
Any more points? Yep.
I'd like to ask a question related to nutritional psychiatry and your field of interest. Thank you. So just, I had several talks with some of your co-authors, with Aniko Kurushi and John Cryan, and in a way, they asked me here in Hungary to give talks on nutritional psychiatry, because I was part of a EU consortium called. Anyway, it's about insulin and the brain and Prime, led by Barbara Franke. So there are many Dutch people involved. But anyway, how in these clinical trials, I think it's challenging to separate the effects of nutritional interventions on general health, on somatic health, and on mental health.
Yeah.
So I think everybody would agree that having a Mediterranean diet will help your cardiovascular system and your quality of life in many ways. But how do you separate that from the direct brain-related pathways?
Yeah, I think that it's your point is well taken. I think that from probably there's a healthy nutrition, and it's not going to be very different for the heart or for the brain. I would agree there. Yeah, but also there, I think in this whole group, the one who was really very realistic and skeptical about the achievements, and the message was a bit like we really have a very poor understanding of how nutrition is impacting on the brain. There are some examples, but it's way too few, and we really need way more innovative strategies to unravel how food could be beneficial for brain health or for health in general. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any more comments? Okay, maybe then if there's no more comments, we don't have to stay here till 5:45. We have to gather in 7 minutes downstairs again, so we can take a little break. I make some notes of what was discussed, so that, but because I expect that I have to report back. Okay, thank you for your attention.